Welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Mark Hillman. I'm the Vice Principal at Southwark College. And I've got with me today Barney Douglas. And we've got about 30 minutes with Barney to talk us through sort of his experience of really working in the film industry. And I'll do a little bit of an intro in just a minute, so you get a bit of a flavour of the work that Barney does and has done. But before we do, I'll just a couple of things really. You're really obviously all very welcome, and we're really keen that you take part in this as well. And there's opportunity for you to use the chat function and post a question in that chat. And obviously, if your questions are, if we're able to get to those questions towards the end of this, then we'll certainly answer those, and Lucy will pick those out for us. So please, do take that chance to ask questions of Barney, because it's really difficult to get hold of him. He's a very, very busy man. So I'm just going to get into a little bit of that introduction for Barney. And I would say, Barney, I really appreciate you sort of giving up a little bit of time in your busy schedule. So a bit of a flavour. So Barney's been working in the industry, in the film and director and production industry for all the time I've known, which is broadly about 20 years. And I look at his LinkedIn profile just this morning. I'm just going to sort of pull out some things that you'll be able to see if you have a look at his LinkedIn profile as well. But he describes himself obviously as that director and producer and writer. He's based in Brighton. He says his latest things, his stuff on his plate at the moment really, and his recent activity includes directing and producing a forthcoming feature documentary arc. He was the writer and director of The Edge, which is a story of the England cricket team, and is in cinemas in 2019, streaming on Amazon Prime, and it's got a television premiere on BBC Two this spring. He directed 1 to 11, which is a FIFA documentary that streamed on Amazon Prime. And his debut feature documentary was Warriors, which was released in UK cinemas a couple of years ago. And that was a really interesting film that certainly, I guess, sort of addressed some pretty difficult and pretty, I guess, sensitive themes around FGM, for example. And when you look at his profile, it talks about his experience as director, as a video producer for the England and Wales Cricket Board, and as a media executive at Sussex County Cricket Club. And before that, he's got a little bit about his education. His education includes a Bachelor of Arts degree from Nottingham Trent University. So that's sort of my introduction to really who Barney is and what he's about. And I've got a couple of questions which I'm going to sort of scroll across to, just to really sort of lift us up and get us going. So Barney, really, the first question I've got is, you in my view, you're a pretty successful director and writer, and it's taken some time to get there, really. So what really inspired you to move into this career?
Well, I never really had like film as an education. I never really studied it particularly. I never thought I was clever enough or good enough for any of those things. I didn't have access to cameras and all that kind of thing. But I always had an instinct. I loved, like a lot of people do, cinema. I loved films. I loved watching them. I felt I had a storytelling creativity, but I didn't really have a route into it. So I kind of did journalism and bits and pieces at university, and kind of played with video cameras when I could get my hands on them and stuff like that. But I wasn't one of these like boy wonders that just kind of picks up a camera and makes a film. It never really felt possible to me. But I always had an instinct that it was something that I wanted to do. So in the end, to cut a long story short, it just got to a place where I had learnt enough and made enough contacts through sport and working in video production in sport and stuff to feel like I could potentially make something myself. And I also was a bit tired of listening to myself talking about it and not actually doing it. So I sort of got to a point in life where it was like, right, well, I'd actually need to kind of put myself on the line and just try and make something. And that's why I kind of chose documentary, because I feel like that's one of the, unlike say making a drama film or something, a documentary, basically you need yourself and you need to find a story. and you need to go and make it. I find it's much more of kind of equal. It's kind of the format of equality, really, in a way. Like, it kind of gives you an opportunity to do it, even if you haven't been a filmmaker for years or anything. It's really about just finding a story and having the kind of guts to go and tell it.
So were there particular documentary makers at that time? You know, if you draw yourself back to when you were sort of beginning to sort of move into that career, particular people you thought, do you know what, that person's great, I really want to do that, or, oh my goodness, they've got all of this wrong and I could do so much of a better job?
Well, it's going to sound strange, but actually only subsequently have I delved into sort of more documentary makers. At the time, it was more about, I wanted to make like fiction films, you know, like a lot of people do. I got a great idea, I could do this, I could do that. But the realities of stepping straight into that are kind of pretty slim. So it was more about, okay, what can I do? And I had a few friends that had started to delve into documentary making, and I had seen a few smaller films that I thought, well, actually, I could kind of do something like that. There was one particular film I remember seeing called Dark Days, which I think was a director called Mark Singer, and it was probably the first documentary that I saw that I was like really like, wow, I was emotionally involved in. And it was about a group of homeless people that lived under New York City in all the old abandoned subway tunnels, and they kind of formed this community basically. And it was just this guy who'd got a camera and gone in and started filming these people and kind of constructed this film. It was very much from, he didn't need much to make it happen basically. So that was really the one film I'd say that inspired me to kind of go, okay, right, well, this is something that I could probably do. And then you've just got to get brave enough.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, you sort of touching on sort of, you know, working or people that are working abroad and people. So my next question is really, you know, you've been all over the world. I know, yeah, and to some pretty amazing places, and I guess worked with some pretty amazing people, which seems great from where I'm sitting, really glamorous and all the rest of it. But you know, what I guess what really is the reality of, you know, day-to-day working for you? Because you know, it's not in all these sunny places and beaches, etc.
It depends. I mean, it depends. The documentary is a lot of planning, a lot of not having a lot of money, a lot of sort of self-motivation, having a vision, feeling the need to tell that vision. Like, I think if you're making a documentary, I think there's a shortcut to maybe a bigger film, or you think, oh, I could get paid for this, and my heart's not really in it. I just don't think it works. I think you have to really find a story that you really believe in, that you will put other things aside to make, basically. I mean, a good example is during Warriors, you know, I had a car. It was a nice car, just a normal car, but it was pretty useful. And I sold that because I needed sort of drone shots in Kenya, and the only way to raise $3,000 was to sell my car and go and do these drone shots, basically. The irony of it being the drone crashed on its first flight, and so that was my car like falling out of the sky and crashing. Those are the things. It has to be like, well, the film, I have this vision and I want to make it, and therefore everything kind of else falls to the side a little bit. That being said, when you do go and film, it can be amazing, but you have the challenges of being in different countries, and even the really things that you wouldn't consider, like visas and getting cameras in and access and all that kind of stuff. And you only really learn it by doing it, and sometimes you can come unstuck, and sometimes, you know, it kind of works smoothly. But yeah, it's tough, and it can be quite isolating and quite lonely, but at the same time, you get the opportunity, if you're lucky, to go to all these places and meet different cultures, different people, and meet some really great, what I'd say is kind of working friends along the way. And actually that would be the biggest thing, is that when I started on my own, and I kind of felt it was quite insular, and that was how I had to make things. But actually, as you become more experienced, it's actually making something with people and a team of people that you trust that actually really makes it satisfying. Otherwise, it's a pretty lonely pursuit.
So does that mean then that you might have worked with people on Warriors, and so that might be a short-term I guess, a short-term piece of collaboration with them,
Yeah,
because they might be doing some editing work or some music work, and that's their specialism. But does that then mean that the next film or the next piece of work, or a piece of work down the line, you're then going back to those contacts, and you really
definitely.
continue to
Yeah,
draw on that network?
yeah. I think people is key, and how you treat people and how you create working environments is absolutely key. So a good example. So we made The Edge, the last film that I did, which is about the England cricket team going to number one, and it was really about mental health, actually, in sport, males' mental health. And we made that, and actually the process of making that was quite difficult. I was working with people I hadn't worked before, and that was quite a difficult experience, new experience for me. But during it, I met a really great editor, and the guy who did the music, this guy called Felix White, who was in the Maccabees, and we worked really, really well together. And now we're moving on to another film, which I don't think it's been announced yet, but I'm doing the John McEnroe feature doc with him and all that kind of stuff, which is a big step up for me.
Yeah.
But I'm able to bring, so the editor's coming with me, the composer Felix is coming with me, the guy who shot The Edge, the cameraman's coming with me. So all the people that I felt had a real trust and understood how we wanted to make films and make them in a positive atmosphere are coming onto the next film. And I actually think I need that structure around me. Like, I need that support network. And I think that is the biggest thing. If you're either making films at the moment or you're getting into it or whatever, find your little tribe if you can. And then there's always going to be people that come and go and change, but actually having a support network around you, because it's hard to get to the end of a film,
Yeah.
and having that kind of little team around you is important.
And I suppose it's also important that if you're going to collaborate in that way from time to time on projects, that actually going back to those people and having that tribe as you've described, you're able to both rely on and trust those people to really deliver the quality that
Yeah,
you need to deliver. Otherwise, your film isn't going to make it, is it?
absolutely. And also it's a kind of about opportunity, and like, kind of, when I made my first film, people like helped me. Kind of, I don't know why really, but they helped me, and I had never really done it before, and they kind of helped me get over the line. And I think it's important to kind of remember that, when you go to your next one, and when you work with people again and stuff like that, to kind of, you've built up a trust there, and they've, as I say, kind of helped me along the way. I kind of want to repay that, and opportunities in film are certainly sometimes harder to come by. So people gave me an opportunity, or I felt they did. So I kind of want to do the same for others.
So it really is an industry where it is a lot of it is really who you know, isn't it?
Definitely, yeah. And I hate that, because I don't like networking, and I'm not very good at it. And
Why
I,
don't you think you're good at it? What do you think is hard about networking?
I think my impression of networking is going to events or something and forcing yourself to talk to people that you wouldn't really know, and like trying to find some common ground and then try and get something from them or what have you. Like that's always been my impression networking, which I hate and I'm not very good at. But actually what I guess I've discovered is that actually networking is really just when you come into contact with people in a creative or working environment,
Mhm.
just getting on with people and finding a common ground in what we are working on or what have you, and relating in a personal level. And then at some point down the line, they may be people you go back to and go, oh, we met during this and we got on well, and they did this particular style of filming which I now need 5 years down the line. I could give them all like it. So it's really important, and it's a bit like what I said at the top. It's just kind of those personal relationships are
Mhm.
really what it comes down to. Like, treat people how you would like to be treated, and and try and form bonds with people in that way, not necessarily to get something physical from them. It's like more actually just kind of broadening your knowledge base as much as anything, really.
So as long as build that, have this broad network of all these different people with all these different skills, and just have that in the bag,
Yeah,
really. And
absolutely.
at some point that you might be able to draw on some of that, or equally, those people might be able to draw on something from you as part of their bag almost.
Definitely. And also, like, I mean, these are all quite broad terms, aren't they? But like the network, but also communication as well. Like, one of the things that I learned as a director, or I'm learning still, and still can get miles better, is actually, like, people don't know what's in your head. You can have the best vision ever, and you can see it, and it can become frustrating that other people don't see it. But actually, the skill is in communicating it to other people. That's what it really comes down to. So, um, and I think that works across a number of.
So how do you do that? You know, that's sort of really interesting bit about communication, isn't it? Is that, that I've got this idea, but now I've really got to distill it down, or I've got to turn it into, you know, the sorts of language that, if we take the England cricket team, for example, if you speak to me in the way that you spoke to the England cricket team, I really have no idea what you're talking about. And conversely, you know, be the same if you're speaking to them about what I do.
Totally, and I think that is the thing. You have to find how the other. You have to consider how the other person will interpret what you're saying, and how can I best get across what I mean to this person, where they come from and their background. I mean, a good example is so Jonathan Trott it was a cricketer in the England team, and he's quite a focus of the edge, and he kind of has a breakdown essentially on pretty much on the field, you know, in this massive match. And part of how I wanted to visualize his calm space and how that calm space got invaded by anxiety and all these kind of things was to put him in the middle of a field in England, basically completely surrounded by like crops and everything, just in the middle of this blank field. And then later on in the film, it comes back round and it's kind of filled with skyline and storms and all this kind of thing to kind of visually represent this breakdown. And when I first said to him, I want you in the middle of the field, he was like, okay, cool. And then we drove up to Ditchling, actually, which is near here, in a beautiful evening. And I sort of said, okay, can you walk out to the middle of that? And he thought I meant cricket field. He was like, what? The cricket field? I was like, no, I meant an actual field type thing. But so he was like, oh, right, okay. But he did it anyway because he trusted me. But it made me think, okay, I need to think about like my language and all this kind of stuff and how I communicate with people. And funny enough, it's going to sound really weird, but I was on a Zoom call like this with John McEnroe yesterday, who's extremely intelligent, but very analytical and precise. So I've got a few ideas for that film, and he would interpret them in it completely differently to how I felt like I was explaining them. So I'm kind of having to actively work out how I'm going to explain something to him in a way that he gets it rather than how I get it. So yeah,
it's quite a difficult part of the job, really, isn't it? Because you're working with all these different people, and there isn't one model then in terms of communication which is working, is it?
Precisely, and that's what it is. You need to work out in each, and then this goes for your subject in the documentary, or your cameraman, or your potentially somebody who's investing in the film. How do they understand what your vision is? Because they might be coming from a business world, so they see things in a very analytical, statistical basis, or what have you. They don't see something in visual, cinematic language. So how can you demonstrate to them what you mean? So you can use visual aids. You can use other films. You can edit together films that show what the style is you're going for. You can, you need to think about how you can explain what you're trying to do, and that is really, really important. It's key for both the people in your film and also the people you're hoping may finance it, because you almost have to be a businessman at the beginning of the film and present a plan and what it's going to cost and why it's going to get its money back and why it's going to be popular and all these kind of things. And this is what it's going to look like and this is what it's going to sound like. And you have to try and distill that into a business plan, essentially. So that people go, okay, I trust you enough to give you some money to make it. And then you go and take that business plan and you try and bring it into life by explaining it in a completely different way to all the people that are either in it or filming it or, all that kind of stuff. So
and that runs all the way through, doesn't it? So we think, here's the financiers. So it says you've got to be turning that into money speak. Here are the people that are working with you on set. So you've got to sort of explain that vision and the participants. But after that, when the film is beginning to come to an end in terms of the production, the making, you've got to do that promotion bit. You've got to do that marketing bit. You've got to work with critics. So every single sort of, I guess, almost activity or group of people requires a different communication set, doesn't it?
Definitely, and that that's what I'm learning, along the way, and like I think that is the key to it, to a lot of it. Belief is the key, and the kind of not necessarily belief in yourself, bizarrely, but belief in the vision, which kind of gets you through all the self-doubt that you're inevitably going to feel. and yeah, and kind of learning along the way. The way I did it, I'd never really made feature length, and when I say feature, I mean like 90 minutes or longer. I'd never made that before I did Warriors,
Yeah.
but I had a vision for these Maasai warriors cinematically, and I felt there was a strong story, and I kind of just followed it, and it ended up in cinemas. But I didn't know it was going to get there. You know, I kind of just kept going. You know.
So let's just take Warriors just for a minute. So I mean, it's a 90-minute film. So you know, I've got no idea where filmmakers are concerned. So I might say, well, do you know what? 90 minutes recording, yeah. I don't know, maybe you need 10, 12 hours of footage, bit of time together, knitting together, and you know what? I'm sure you can bang that out in 3 months. Is that the reality?
No,
How long did it take you?
Well, Warriors was my film school, I guess. So in the end, it only cost something like 130. I say only, but 130,000 pounds to get that made. I'd say the average feature documentary is about 500,000, 700,000, something like that. But so
I mean, so that's not your own cash, is it?
No. Warriors was about 130,000, and that took place over. I think it took 3 years to make.
Wow.
Because so the first thing was what I did. I flew out with a camera and met everyone, and I had to kind of explain my vision and how I felt like we could do something and get all their buy-in. And all the Maasai were up for it, but then they had to get the permission from the chiefs and all this kind of. So there was a whole rigmarole around it that I had never even considered before I went out there.
So that's real cultural difference, isn't it? There.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I'd probably do it differently now, like having learned a lot more. But at the time, I was quite naive, and I just got on a plane and went. So the first plan was, let's shoot for a week or two with them and produce something like a 10-minute Indiegogo promo that we can then raise some crowdfunding and get us going to the next level. So that's why it took so long. It would be like film a bit, raise a bit more money, film a bit, raise a bit more money. So it was like putting the tracks down as the train went.
Yeah.
And then you'd hopefully get to a point where somebody with a bit more money would go, actually, this is really great, and let's get it to its finished point, which is eventually what happened. But even when the film was premiering in a cinema, I sort of sold sort of sponsorship of the premiere itself, so I could pay for the PR of the film to promote that it existed. So like it was always juggling these plates. It's a stressful way of doing it. I wouldn't recommend it, but it was also a really good learning curve for me. It was almost like paying my dues a little bit. I kind of learned the whole process from start to finish. So that was really, really, really helpful to me, definitely.
So I mean, for a piece of work that takes 3 years, from start to finish, is broadly what you're saying, that really must take quite a lot of, I don't know, self-control, determination. When it's bleak November evenings, and I've still got to do all this work, and I'm still quite a long way. That's really hard to get motivated.
That's a tough one, and also I didn't get paid for that. The money that we got went to either the cameraman who filmed it, the editor eventually, like all the sound design at the end, and all the kind of post-production stuff that you wouldn't really necessarily think about if you hadn't done it before. Post-production on a film is definitely around 50 to 60,000 pounds at least on a kind of feature documentary. So that's almost like half our budget. Yeah. So I was kind of working still for the England cricket team at the time. So I was doing another job at the same time. So I had to keep doing that job to get paid so that I could keep popping back to Kenya and keep that story going. So yeah, I mean, that exhausted me for those 3 years, but it's kind of, that was the thing that set me up for being able to do the next film, which was The Edge, and then being able to do McEnroe, and that was the gateway that opened the world to me. And that's why once I'd done one, people then just assumed that I was a director, and therefore I'd be capable of doing another one, even though like I still to this day feel like I'm blagging it, but you need to get your first thing done, and I think that takes sacrifice normally. So it's got to be a story you really believe in.
Yeah.
But it's really possible. This is the thing. That's why I kind of, if you find a story and you get the permission to tell it, you are that's the key in documentary. If you've got the rights to tell the story and you're telling it, then that is the key. because then if you do it well, or if you do it and it's a strong story, you don't have to have finished it. You can have 30 minutes of really great footage, and you can go to a broadcaster, or you can go to a financier and say, this is what we've got and this is what we need to finish it, and then it's your story, it's your rights, and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's just one thing I'd say from the outset, is if you do find a story and you meet contributors and they're happy for you to tell it, it sounds boring, but get a legal document saying that you have the rights to tell the story. It's going to sound weird, but it's like, that's the first thing you should do. Make sure that the rights of the story are signed to you so that you can make the film, because that's the key.
So what? So if you don't have that, does that mean that the people that want to finance, or the people you're then working with, can then turn around and say, actually, your story, whatever it was about, now we want to take this angle, we want to include this, and your story becomes diluted? Is that what you're saying?
No, what it basically means is, if to say you've been filming for you had a half an hour's footage, or you had a great element of your story or what have you, and the contributors were really good and the story was really great and everything, you can't actually raise money for that or even sell it unless you have the right to do it. And that's the legal right. So it's just very simple. You find a film lawyer online or something, and you'll need your contributors to assign their story to you, basically, and then you have the right to then raise money to get it finished or what have you. But when you talk about, say, a financier coming in and saying, oh, can we push the film in this direction, or you will definitely encounter those challenges along the way. Definitely. And
how does that feel then? Because you've got in your mind, I want to produce this film about this particular thing, but you're being controlled because actually you haven't got £500,000 or £1 million.
Yeah.
How does that make you feel, and how do you work your way through that?
Well, I think being creative with a budget and understanding that you don't have infinite money and should inform your vision at the beginning. So what we do is like a treatment, essentially. So it's as I said, your film on paper, how you would make it, what the structure is, what the story is, and where the money would be spent. So it gives anybody looking at it a strong idea of, okay, for this budget, this film is makeable. But if you've only got, say, you've got £100,000 or £50,000 or £20,000, and you're saying, I want to have all these special effects in it, or I want to fly around the world because we want to follow this person from every country across the world, and your 20 grand is not going to make that film. You're 50. So the budget needs to fit the idea, essentially, and that will always be tight in documentary. And you need to think about what's most important to the film. How can I best tell this story with this money available? And I think being really clever with that, it can force you to be creative, and I think that's a good thing, really.
I mean, what you're really doing is really painting a picture of a job that is very exciting for you, but that encompasses so many other elements. It's not just about, I'm going to write a story, I'm going to pick up a camera, and I'm going to interview some really dynamic, interesting people. There's a whole load of other stuff that you just described: money, planning, collaboration, networking. That really is the role, and almost the filming part is a, I wouldn't say it's a small part, but it's not the major, the biggest part of that job, is it really?
No, it's not. And that's the kind of thing that you've got to get your head around, because all you want to be doing is like making it and having that fun and like telling this great story, because you're a storyteller. That's why you want to do something like this.
Yeah.
But it's naive to think that all the other stuff doesn't come with it. And actually, if you can embrace the other stuff, it will make you a better filmmaker, because you understand the process, you understand the challenges you'll face, you'll understand that there are some things that are worth fighting for in your film and other things that aren't, and all that kind of thing. You'll understand that the more money you have actually can sometimes become more difficult, because more people have invested that money and they have their opinions and all this kind of stuff, and you've got to manage all those different elements of it. And I think the idea of the sort of auteur director who just, it's my vision, and that may be true if you're a genius and you've got some incredible films behind you, but if you're just starting out in documentary or anything like that, it's kind of not the case. If anything, in a strange sort of way, the most freedom I had ever was on Warriors, in the first film. We just kind of made it for hardly any money and just scraped it together. and kept the tracks going and got it to the end. And actually, it was the most stressful in some ways, but it was the most creative because I didn't have people telling me what it should be like, and I didn't have all those things. I was just kind of naive, which is no bad thing. So like, so the first film you make will probably be it'll be the toughest, but also the easiest in some sort of way. But at the end of the day, I still maintain though that it's like it's the kind of format that anyone can do. Like if you're a storyteller, or if you instinctively feel that you're a storyteller, then documentary is a great place to start. Or even if you're a producer documentary, you don't have to be the director. Like, there's loads of roles in making a documentary come to life. So you don't have to be, maybe the business side of it or the analytical side of it or the promotion side of it is the thing that you feel really good at. There's loads of roles in it. But definitely don't go into documentary if you want to get rich, because that's not you might get there eventually, but like not in the first few. So
I've got one more question for you, really. And if you were to go back to when you were 17, around about that sort of time, 17, 18, this is the age of the people that we work with at the college.
Yeah.
If you were to go back to yourself at that point, is there any advice you'd give yourself?
Yeah, I mean, kids, like younger people nowadays, seem to me so much more like clued up, switched on, and kind of, I'm sure like there's exceptions, but generally, like I look back now and I think it took me probably another 8 years really before I was kind of thinking, right, okay, I'm going to try and focus. I wish I'd focused more on something that I loved, because I'd be 10 years ahead of where I am now, type thing. Like I feel like the earlier if you love film or documentary or that creative side of the industry, the earlier you start, the better. Like the earlier you get into it and start kind of meeting people and putting yourself about, the better, really. I can't see how it can fail to help. But make stuff. That's the biggest thing I'd say, is make stuff. You learn most by making it. Courses are great, and you will learn and make contacts and maybe meet your little tribe on a course type thing like that. You'll all make something together. I think that's one of the massive benefits of those things. But it's all very well saying, oh, I want to be a director, or like be one, like just do it. I think that's the best advice I'd give, because I think when I was 17, 18, I was like, well, that's like for other people who either they've always been in that world, or they know people in that world, or they at fancy film schools and stuff. Like, so I kind of, for a long time, I just felt like I wasn't part of that. Whereas actually, I think it's the exact opposite, really.
So really about, you say, saying to yourself, seize the day, actually do something about it, commit to it, make some films, even if they're really low budget, doesn't really matter, but it's that art of storytelling, get that practice in and play, really, and understand what you like and what you don't like, I guess.
Because you might like think, oh, I want to be a director. You might do the director and think, oh, this is rubbish. I'm actually much better and much more enjoy like going and meeting people to raise some money, or like trying to sell it, or whatever it might be. Like, I think it's the early, if you instinctively feel that's what you want to do, like don't waste time, just get stuck. And the other thing I'd say about documentary, we touched on it earlier, it is really about people, like how you deal with who you work with as contributors as well, because there might be sensitive stories that you're involved in. And those relationships are really key, and because everybody, if someone's giving you their story, that's a privilege, and you need to kind of look after them through the process as well. So learning about all that kind of stuff, it's actually kind of common sense, really. Like it's not actually that, there's not some magic key, it's just kind of common sense, but like practice doing it and making stuff. And I think that's what I'd definitely say to my younger self. Like I was just down the pub all the time, probably, so the union or whatever. So, definitely loved it, had a great time, and I think it came to me, or the drive came to me at the right time for me. But if you are feeling the drive now, I would definitely do it.
Yeah, that's lovely. So, just gonna, if you've got just a few more minutes, if there are any questions that any of the people watching have got, Lucy, could you put some of those through for us?
There's one question. What is your job role?
So I'm mainly a director of documentaries, feature docs that go into cinemas and things. I do some for streaming services and TV and things, but I'm also a producer, which is why I'm quite across the business element of film as well, because the producer is basically somebody who structures the film, gets the money to get it made, makes sure it's scheduled, makes sure you deliver on all these contracts, and then the director is responsible for the creative side of it. But you'll find in documentary that most directors are producers as well, because there's just not enough money to kind of employ all these different people. So you have to be across that as well.
Yeah. Lucy, is there anything else that's come up?
Not really. That's the only question.
No, okay. So Barney, really appreciate you giving us some time today. It's been great to talk with you in this way. So thank you very much.
It's been helpful in some way, but always happy to chat about it. But yeah, no worries. Thank you very much.
We'll be following what happens, I think, with this next project.
Yeah,
and see how it turns out, really.
Well, if COVID doesn't kibosh it too much, yeah. So yeah, it's due. I've got to finish it by next November, I think. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it'd be we'll all then come to the premiere and see what you've done with John McEnroe, won't we?
See what happens. If he hasn't hurled abuse at me by then.
No, I'm sure he won't have done. I'm sure he won't have done. I'm sure you can take it. All right, look, really good to speak to you, Barney. Thanks ever so much. Really appreciate it.
Guys.
All right. Bye now.